Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Monday and welcome back. I hope that you all had a nice, long, safe, and fun spring break. And I'm happy that you're all back, and I hope that you had a good time. So, today, what we're going to talk about is we are going to talk about noticing things that happen in a story, whether there's words or sometimes even with no words. And how we're going to do that is that we're going to look at pictures, and we're also going to look at different things such as gestures. So a gesture can be a wave, blowing a kiss, any sort of hand movement. We're going to look at the way a character moves. If the character is huffing and puffing, maybe they're angry or just really out of breath. We're going to look at dialogue tags and things that the character says, like maybe they said, he cried or she shouted. And we're going to see how those are going to affect what the character does. We're going to look at word choice. Maybe sometimes they would say ran, or maybe sometimes they would say hurried, and then maybe sometimes they're going to say sprinted. So the word choice is going to tell us how fast, in that particular case, the character might be moving. And we also want to look at parts that explain what a character's motives are, what they want. So maybe it says he wanted, or she needed, or I believed, something along those lines. So the story that we're going to read today is going to be called On a Beam of Light, and it's a story of Albert Einstein. It's a book by Jennifer Byrne, and the pictures are by Vladimir Radunsky. This is what the book looks like. So just from the cover, we can see that he's looking up to a beam of light. So that just shows that he's very thoughtful. He's thinking, he's noticing his surroundings. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my lucky pen and paper over here. You might have post-it notes or whatever you might be writing in, a notebook, whatever. I'm going to write down that he is thoughtful. So we're going to do that throughout too. On a beam of light. Again, On a Beam of Light, a story of Albert Einstein. Over 100 years ago, as the stars swirled in the sky, as the earth circled the sun, as the March winds blew through a little town by a river, a baby boy was born. His parents named him Albert. So you can see the baby. You can see how happy his parents were. So I'm going to write down that his parents were happy that they had a baby. And something that I noticed in the text that it didn't necessarily say, but it talked about and mentioned, was that the March winds blew. So that tells me that Albert Einstein was born in March. So I'm going to write born in March. Albert turned 1 year old and didn't say a word. Parents look a little concerned. I'm going to write down that he didn't speak. And now he's only 1 year old, so it's not like he's getting older and older. Just looks like they're maybe spurting a little bit. Albert turned 2 and didn't say a word. Parents looking down at him. Albert turned 3 and hardly said a word at all. So at 3 years old, he's talking, but he's not talking a whole lot. So next to didn't speak, I'm going to put quiet, because he's speaking now, but he's not speaking a whole lot. He just looked around with his big, curious eyes. Looked and wondered, looked and wondered. His parents worried. Little Albert was so different. Was there something wrong? But he was their baby, so they loved him, no matter what. And there's little speech bubbles. So different, but so dear. So they're very accepting of Albert. He's thinking and wondering, using that brain of his. So even though he's not talking a whole lot, he's still thinking and wondering, looking and wondering. One day, when Albert was sick in bed, his father brought him a compass, a small round case with a magnetic needle inside. No matter which way Albert turned the needle always pointed north, as if held by an invisible hand. Albert was so amazed, his body trembled. So that's what his body's doing in this case, it's trembling. He's like, he can't believe it. Suddenly, he knew there were mysteries in the world, hidden and silent, unknown and unseen. He wanted more than anything to understand those mysteries. So there's him looking at his compass, and the needle's always going north, and his dad looks kind of amused. He looks happy. He looks interested that Albert is interested in something. So I'm going to write for Albert curious and motivated. He wanted to do this no matter what. He just had to know. He needed to understand those mysteries no matter what. And you can see that again. It says it in the words, but also if you look at his face, you can just see that look of curiosity. He just wants to know. He needs to know. Albert started asking questions. Questions at home. Questions at school. So many questions that some of his teachers told him he was a disruption to his class. They said he would never amount to anything unless he learned to behave like all the other students. They made all the students look exactly the same. So that's something the illustrator did to show what the teacher was saying in the picture as well. But Albert didn't want to be like the other students. He wanted to discover the hidden mysteries in the world. So discover is a good word. That means he wants to find things. He's willing to work. He wants to figure things out on his own. Things that are still mysterious, things that people don't even know. So I'm going to write willing to work. One day, Albert was zipping through the countryside on his bicycle. It's another good word, zipping. So they could have said that he was riding fast. They could have said that he was riding his bike down a hill, but they specifically wrote zipping, like he was really, really going fast. Zipping through the countryside on his bicycle, he looked up at the beams of sunlight speeding from the sun to the earth. Now that reminds me of the cover, the title of the book, On a Beam of Light. So let's see what that has to do with everything. He wondered what it would be like to ride one of those beams, and in his mind, right then and there, Albert was no longer on his bicycle, no longer on the country road. He was racing through space on a beam of light. There's that title again. It was the biggest, most exciting thought Albert had ever had, and it filled his mind with questions. So that's showing him, he wasn't really coming off of his bike, but this picture showing him figuratively coming off of his bike, coming off of that bike in his head. And not a care in the world anymore, he just wanted to know what it would feel like to be on that beam of light. So I'm gonna put big imagination too. Albert began to read and study. He read about light and sound, about heat and magnetism, and about gravity, the invisible force that pulls us down toward our planet and keeps the moon from floating away into outer space. So you can see from the words that he's beginning to read and study, but if you look at that picture, let's look at it one more time. That's a lot of books. A lot of books. So he really, really likes books, and he really, really wants to learn. So I'm going to write that down. Wants to learn. And he read about numbers. Albert loved numbers. They were like secret language for figuring things out. But all that reading still didn't answer all of Albert's questions. So he kept on reading, wondering and learning. So we can kind of see inside of Albert's brain here. All those things aren't in the air. All of those things aren't written on his walls. I think his parents would be kind of upset if he wrote all those things on his walls. They're just things that are in his head. So the illustrator is showing us what Albert sees in his head. He's very imaginative. He really wants to see these numbers. Some people might see things in pictures. Some people might hear music and be able to see things. Albert was really good with numbers. He loved them and they just made sense to him. So that's what he kept seeing in his head. When Albert graduated from college, he wanted to teach the subjects he loved, all the things he had read about all those years, but Albert couldn't find a job as a teacher, so he got another job. So there's him imagining what it would be like for him to be a teacher, but he couldn't find a job. A simple, quiet job in a government office, an office where he worked with other people's ideas and inventions. He didn't work very well and very quickly. He did his work very well and very quickly, so quickly that he had lots of extra time to think and wonder. So that was obviously a mistake, but I knew in my head that didn't make sense. So good thing I went back and reread, or else I would have had that completely wrong. So my apologies. So I'm going to write down that he is working in a government building, and he originally wanted to be a teacher. All right, so we have a lot down right now. This book is very long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here, and we are going to continue with this books next time, putting a bookmark in it right now, so that way we can come back to it. Again, I'm happy that you're all back. I'm excited to talk to you all this week, and I hope that you had a really awesome, really fun spring break, and I hope you have a great day too. See ya.